Okay, guys, your flow chart, this green side is just review for the ways of factoring, because we're going to use this skill, the skill you've already been practicing and mastering to solve quadratics. So it's just kind of overview of all the different types of questions you might come across for factoring, and then we'll show you the steps, like how you use that skill to now solve a problem that's a quadratic. So the first step is always look for a GCF. I don't care if it's a difference of squares, a trinomial, or grouping. Okay, so you always look for a GCF first. So these are steps for all types of factoring problems. If I'm talking about two terms, I'm going to scroll up just a little bit. The difference of squares, I kind of underlined that here. The key to this is that you must see a subtraction and you have to have perfect squares. That means you have to have an exponent of 2. Okay? So the key whenever you have difference of squares, change my font here, is you look and check that you have the subtraction, which I do right here. And you do is you take the square root. Oops, sorry. What happened? Undo. I don't need that. There it is. Okay. You take the difference, you take the square root. Just trying to change this font. So you take the square root of the first term, you take the square root of the second term. So the square root of x squared is just x. Okay? Anything with an exponent of 2 is a perfect square, or if it's an even exponent, then you can take the square root of that. You just divide it by 2. So the square root of x squared is x. We have a minus sign, so we're going to put a minus here. And the square root of 64 is 8. So we'll bring that down. So really your factors, because it's a difference of squares, you're going to have 2 different signs. So we're going to have x minus 8 and x plus 8. And the parentheses are the factors. Now, to do the square root on your calculator, that's when you have to hit second. If it opens, there it goes, sorry. I'm going to clear this up. So you have to hit the blue second and then the x squared, and then it gives you the square root sign, the radical sign. So when you put 64, hit enter. For it to be a perfect square, you have to have a whole number answer. If it gives you a decimal answer, then it's not a perfect square and you can't use this method. Okay, so we have x plus 8 and x minus 8. Now, for the second example here, you always look for a GCF first. So is there a greatest common factor between our 18m squared n and our 2n cubed? What's the GCF? 2, that's the number. There's also a variable. Yeah, 2n. Okay, so we're going to divide both terms by 2n. Write this on your I guess on your notes on your paper. That's going to be outside the parentheses, and you're going to be left with 9m squared minus n squared. Okay, because the 2's would end up canceling, and you're just subtracting 3 minus 1, that gives you 2. All right, so now when I look at this, I'm going to fix this right here. I have a perfect square for both. 9 is a perfect square and m squared is a perfect square. The square root of 9m squared would be what? What's the square root of 9? 3m. Yeah, so this would just come out to be 3m. We're going to keep the parentheses and the 2n in front. The square root of n squared is just n. So we have 3m minus n and 3m plus n. When you have a difference of squares, you're going to have a plus and a minus set of factors. Okay, so that's 2 terms. All right, if you have 3 terms, you have 2 options. The one to the left here, the trinomial, this is when there's no coefficient, meaning no number in front here of the x squared. I don't know why I keep doing that. There, that's a little bit better, I guess. So what I just wrote as a little note is that you have no coefficient. That means number in front. So we're going to use the X puzzle. We're going to first find, right here, it says first find the factors of C that add up to B. Your C is your last term, your B is your middle term. So if I was to work this first example, x squared minus 8x, minus 42, I'm going to start off by building my X puzzle. And then what number should go on the top of the puzzle based on this problem? Yeah, negative 42. And what number should go at the bottom?
X.
A number. It's a number, negative 1. Do y'all remember us doing this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so what's our factors of a negative 42? So the minute, sorry, I'm going to change this to this, if it lets me. All right, the minute I see that there's a negative sign here, I know it's going to be a negative and a positive, because that's the only way I can get a negative product. So factors of a negative 42 that have a sum of a negative 1. Yeah, negative 7 and positive 6. So that means my answer for my factors are x minus 7 and x plus 6. That would be our factors, our answer. Okay. Now for the second example we have here, I'm just going to scroll up so we can see it. I check and I see a GCF between all three terms. What would be the GCF between the three? Yeah, so we're going to divide everything by 2 first. Okay? So the 2 is going to go in front of the parentheses. This will leave me with w squared plus a 10w plus 25. So I'm going to do I'm just going to draw it out to the side here. My puzzle, my X puzzle with the trinomial inside the parentheses. So what number is going to go on the top of the X puzzle? Yeah, 25. And then what number would go at the bottom? 10. All right, so we're looking for factors of 25 with the sum of 10. Does that belong to someone? Sorry. Factors of 25 with the sum of 10. Yeah, 5 and 5. Okay, so we keep the 2 in front of the parentheses. This would be w plus 5 and w plus 5. Do y'all remember what that means when you have, or another way to write, when you have these 2 factors of that are the same? To square, yeah, so this would be 2 parentheses w plus 5 parentheses squared. This would be our final simplified answer. Now, if there is a coefficient, so this next one over here to the right is with the coefficient. That's why I circled the A, because now we have a number in front of the x squared. So this is when you slip and slide, or slide and multiply, or slip and multiply. So you take the front number and slide it to the back and multiply. So I changed the X puzzle here. I said the top is going to be A times C, and the bottom is going to be the B. So I just add a note to the flow chart for your setup. So on this example they have here, step 1 is always check for GCF. So I have 30x squared minus 27x plus 6. Is there a GCF between those 3 terms? Yeah, so divide everything by 3 first. So this will give me 3 parentheses 10x squared minus 9x plus 2. Now I'm going to slip and slide the 10, because that's the coefficient, and multiply it to the 2, the last term, at the end. So in my x puzzle, which I'm going to do to the side here, now 10 times 2, the 20 is on the top, and a negative 9 is on the bottom. All right, so we're looking for factors of 20 with the sum of a negative 9. What are you going to put in the x?
Oh, -5.
Negative 5 and negative 4. So this is the part you need to make sure you add as you're working your steps, because if you slip in and multiply, or slide and multiply the number over, we have x minus 5, parentheses, x minus 4. Because we have this coefficient, this 10, then you have to divide each factor by 10 if you multiply. Anytime you multiply, you have to do the inverse of that, which is division, to find the factors. So the thing we have to remember here is these two fractions here can be reduced. I can reduce negative 5 over 10 to what? Yeah, so I'm just going to write it underneath. So 3 parentheses x minus 1/2. And I can reduce the negative 4 over 10 as well. What does that reduce to? Yeah, x minus 2/5. Okay. Now, I'm going to add a little note here, because you got to remember, if it doesn't reduce to a whole number, you have to remember to do bottom number comes up. So this bottom number here, 2, will come up in front of the x. This bottom number 5 will come up in front of the x. So it would be 3 parentheses 2x minus 1 and 5x minus 2. That would be our final answer. All right, so don't forget to do bottoms up. You're definitely going to see that today when we're factoring or solving. And then the last type is grouping. That's what we did yesterday. So when we're using the grouping, this is when we see 4 terms. So you got to remember to put parentheses in the first 2 and the last 2. And you probably want to do this with us since you were absent. And then you have to find, because this is what your homework's about, the GCF of each term. So in the first term, the first grouping, or binomial, 2a cubed and a squared b, what's the GCF between them? Yeah, a squared. So we're going to divide everything by a to the second power. So that's going to leave me with 2a minus b. We're going to keep the operation to get to the second binomial, because that'll help me set up my second factor. If I have a 10a and a 5b, what would be the GCF between them?
5.
Yep, so we're going to divide both terms by 5. So 5 parentheses 2a minus b. So what we're trying to see is a common binomial, which is what we have with the a minus b. That is one of our factors, a minus b. And then our second set of factors deal with the GCF. So we have an a squared and we have a plus 5. So that would be a squared plus 5. And that is our answer. Oh, I'm sorry. 2a minus b. Okay, so these are the 4 different ways you're going to start, or the 4 skills we did. So we're going to just apply this to solving now. Okay, so that's why we reviewed that. So if you flip this over, we now have solving quadratic functions by factoring. There's some key things you have to remember to do that. One, I'm going to start this first box where it says the equation must be in standard form and set equal to 0. This is an example of standard form equal to 0. Okay. Now, it says that this method does not work for everything, for every quadratic. So if the quadratic is not factorable, you can use a different method, and I'll talk about that after we practice this method, because there's some possible shortcuts to getting to your solution. If it's not factorable, it doesn't mean it does not have no roots or no solution. Okay, you just have to maybe use a different method. And then this is important. You have to remember that the factors are not the solutions. We've been factoring, but that's not the solution. We got to do another step. So these steps here, these 6 steps, that's what we're going to follow and apply. So the first step is they want you to arrange the equation in standard form. That means it should go from highest exponent to the smallest one. So I just added that note. Has to be highest exponent to smallest. Step 2 says if the equation does not equal to 0, make it equal to 0. To make it equal to 0, you're going to have to use inverse operations. Basically, I'm going to put a slash, do the opposite. That's what an inverse is meaning doing the opposite. So once we have it equal to 0, then you can factor your equation like a normal trinomial, okay? Then you have to set each factor, set of parentheses, equal to 0. This will look like two separate equations. Solve for x, okay? The thing about your x, the solution for x, okay? The solutions for an x are the solutions, which means another thing we call it is a root, a 0, an x-intercept. These are all examples of solutions. So all of these go together. These are your examples or examples of solutions. So instead of saying find the solution, they may say find the root. Instead of saying find the x, they may say find the 0 or find the x-intercept. You just got to know that they mean the same thing. Okay? All right, so let's apply the rules. I'm just going to scroll this up. Example 1. Step 1. Arrange the equation in standard form. Is the equation in example 1 in standard form? Okay, then it says if the equation does not equal to 0, make it to equal 0. So step 2, is our equation equal to 0? Yeah. All right, so we're ready to go straight to 3, factor. How would I factor this problem here? Because we have a trinomial. We're just factoring, guys. So how would I factor this? Yeah, you would have to use the x. So I'm just going to draw it here in the box to the side. What would go at the top of your x? Negative 12. It's the last number. Goes at the top. What goes at the bottom of your x? Negative 1. Okay, so because I see it's a negative 12, sorry, right there. I know my factors are negative and positive. So what factors give me a sum of a negative 1? Yeah, negative 4 and positive 3. So what we're going to write is x minus 4 parentheses and x plus 3 parentheses equal to 0. So step 4 says to set, each factor, that means the set of parentheses equal to 0. So to do that, we're going to do x minus 4 is going to equal to 0, and x plus 3 is equal to 0. We're going to set each set of parentheses equal to 0. Now, you're going to see a pattern here. You don't have to do this step once you start realizing what happens. You'll realize how to get to the answer, to the solution. But to solve for x, okay, we would have to do the inverse operation. So if this is minus 4, the opposite of subtraction is what? Addition. So we're going to add 4 to both sides to isolate the x. This would be x equals a positive 4 answer. That's what we're solving for. To solve the quadratic, you're solving for x. So we have x equals 4, and now I'm going to do the same thing for the other equation. How would I solve for x for this equation? Yeah, minus 3. Do the opposite of plus would be minus, so this would be x equals negative 3. Now, the way you can write your answer, guys, and I think I'll put it over here on the side. See how we have two solutions? I can say x equals 4, comma, negative 3. I can write it like an order pair. My x has two values, a positive 4 and a negative 3. All right, so on example 2, is it in standard form?
Yes.
Is it equal to 0?
Yes.
Yep, okay, so then we're going straight to factoring. For this one, because there is a coefficient, and I'm circling that coefficient, you should be slip and slide to solve it. So I'm going to slide this 2 to the back. My x is now going to have 3 times 2, which is 6 on the top, and 7 at the bottom. So I'm now just looking for factors of 6 with the sum of 7. That would be 6 and 1. 6 times 1 gives you 6. 6 plus 1 gives you 7. So here's my parentheses. X plus 6 and x plus 1 equals to 0. But because we had a coefficient that we multiplied, you're now going to divide each one by 2. Now, 6 over 2, that can reduce to what? Yeah, so this is x plus 3. And then I can't reduce it, right? So just keep it as that fraction. As long as it's the reduced fraction, you're fine. Because we're trying to solve. We're not trying to get the factors. Okay. Now, normally what we would do, and I'm just going to try to hopefully get you to see a shortcut. To solve this, we're going to make each equation equal to 0. So this would say x plus 3 would equal to 0. Each factor, I said each equation. And then x plus 1/2 equals 0. Well, to solve the first one, I would have to subtract 3, right? So this would give me x equals negative 3. You see what I did right there? Now, I want you to see something here. You see right here in our factors, we had a plus sign, but then for the solution, it was a negative sign. You see how it was just the opposite right there? Like if I go back to the original one, the factor had a minus 4, but then the solution was a positive 4. You see here, it was plus 3, but in the solution, it's minus 3. So what would the other solution be? Yeah, minus 1/2. Because this said plus half, right? So you just have to do the opposite of what's in your parentheses to get to the solution. That is one of the shortcuts, is just do the opposite to get to the solution. Because that's what's most important here, okay? All right, so on example 3, is it in standard form? Does it go highest to smallest? Is it equal to 0? No, it's equal to 1. So what we're going to have to do is do the opposite, or do the inverse, to make it equal to 0. That means we're going to subtract 1. When I do that, this now becomes 0 right there. And you're just going to rewrite it, guys, in standard form, high to low. So this would be 6x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. All right, so now that I have it in standard form and it's equal to 0, I can pick a method, which should be slip and slide, okay? So in my x, I should have a -6 and a -1. 6 times the -1 gives me the -6 on top, and the -1 is the negative middle term. I need factors of a -6 to give me a sum of a -1. Yeah, 2, a +2, and a -3. Yes. So I'm going to go in my parentheses. X plus 2, x minus 3 equals 0. And before I solve that, I have to remember that I had a coefficient, so I have to divide it by 6 first. This can be reduced, okay? 2/6 can be reduced to 1/3. Okay, there's the first one. 3/6 can be reduced to 1/2. Okay, so there's my second one. So my solution, I'm going to do the opposite of plus 1/3. I'll make that -1/3, comma, 1/2. That's my solution. Do the opposite of what's in the parentheses.
So for this one, you're not moving
No, because we just want the solution. If I ask for the factors, then you would bottom up. Okay. All right, so on example 4, is it in standard form? Is it equal to 0? No. So how am I going to make this equal to 0? Opposite. We got to do the opposites right here, right? Yeah, it is a negative. So the opposite of that would be plus 14x. Plus 14x. Whatever I write on one side of the equal sign, I got to do the other. Now this is not going to equal to 0. Okay? So now I'm just going to put this in standard form. X squared plus a 14x plus 49 equals 0. All right, so now we're back to a trinomial with no coefficient, so I can go straight to my x. What happened to my pen? Oh. What's going on? It won't let me change. Okay, so what number goes on top?
49.
49. What number goes on the bottom? 14. Okay, so we're looking for factors of 49 with the sum of 14. 7 and 7. Okay, so this becomes x plus 7, x plus 7 equals 0. But remember, anytime I see two factors that are the same, right? This is really just x plus 7 squared equal to 0. And our x would be just the opposite of this, okay, which would be -7. I don't know why it's stuck. I knew that was gonna happen. Okay. I don't know how that got there. Okay, so on this last one, or example 5, not the last one, it's equal to 0. We're good, but it's not in standard form. So how would I make this in standard form? What has to come first? What's the highest exponent? Yeah, so this would have to be 10 x squared. Then what would come next? Yep, negative 65x. Then last would be minus that 35 equal to 0. Sorry about this circle. I don't know why it's there. I wonder if I can select it. Nope. Oh, nope. No. Okay, maybe that'll make it move. Okay, so now that I have in standard form, do I have a GCF? Because that's what you should always check first. Do I have a GCF between the 3? 5. Yep, 5. So we're going to divide everything by 5 first. So when I do that, we get 2x squared minus 13x minus 7 equals 0. Now I have a trinomial with a coefficient of 2, so I'm going to slip and slide it back to that negative 7 and multiply. So my factoring, I'll put it on this side over here, would end up being a negative 14 on top and a negative 13 on the bottom. So I'm looking for factors of a negative 14 with the sum of negative 13. That would be a negative 14 and 1. Oops. All right, so 5 is in front of the parentheses. We got x minus 14 and x plus 1 equal to 0. But because we slipped and slide, we have to now divide by that coefficient. So we're dividing by 2. So this can be simplified to x minus 7. And this one is just going to be x plus 1/2. And our x in this problem is the opposite of what we see. So x equals now a positive 7 and a negative 1/2. So we didn't do anything with the 5? No. You would only do something with the 5 if it had a variable. Okay, but if it's just a constant, we can't solve for that. We're only solving for the x's. All right, so our last one, I don't know why this is doing this. Is it in standard form? Yeah, highest exponent is first, but is it equal to 0? No. So what would I need to do to make this equal to 0? Subtract the 250. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so when you do that, guys, really only what happens is this now is equal to 0. We're just going to rewrite it in standard form. 10x squared minus 250 equals 0. I don't understand what this thing is. Why is this thing on my... Okay, this is driving me crazy. Sorry. All right. Now, GCF. Do I have a GCF here? Yeah. What is it? Yep, 10. So when I do that, I get 10 parentheses x squared minus 25 equals 0. And now that I see this minus and I see an x squared and a 25, this is difference of squares. When I have difference of squares, I just need to take the square root of both of them and write x minus 5 and x plus 5 equals 0. Because the square root of x Square root of x squared, that's I get the x right there. Square root of 25, that gives me the 5. When you have a difference of squares, you have to have difference of signs, a negative and a positive. So my solution, x, is just positive 5, comma, negative 5. Two different signs for difference of squares. Okay? So you're going to use these steps, use these examples, to do some practice of solving quadratics by factoring. Keep the green paper that has all the notes on it, and the white paper is what we're going to check. We're going to do some more practice together, just make sure you're on the right track. Okay, so this is what we're looking at, the practice sheet. Okay? So your steps, just if you need to look back at these steps at the top, to refer to each problem you can. If you need more room to work it out, you can go to the back of the sheet. So the first step is it in standard form? Yeah. The second is the equation set to 0? Yes. So now we have to factor. We're now at step 3, solve by factoring. For this one, we should go straight to our x puzzle. Okay? Because there's no coefficient, and it's a trinomial. What number is going to go on the top of the puzzle?
20.
Negative 20. Good. What number goes on the bottom of the puzzle? Negative 1. Good. Because I see it's a negative sign for the 20, I'm going to have a negative and a positive type of factor. What would be my factors of a negative 20 with the sum of negative 1? Negative 5, positive 4. Okay, so we're going to write them out. X minus 5, parentheses, and parentheses x plus 4. Those are equal to 0. But to get to the solution, right, to solve for x, you have to do the opposite what's in the parentheses. So instead of saying minus 5, my solution is going to be positive 5, comma, negative 4. And that's what I'm looking for on this sheet, getting to the solving for x. I'm going to do like on the left side. So I'm going to do a couple with you to make sure everyone's on the right track. But I'm going to stay on the left side of the worksheet. So on 2, is it in standard form? Is it equal to 0? No. So what am I going to need to do to make this equal to 0? Yeah, subtract 3. Okay. Now the 3 cancels, and now I have a 0 here. So now we have to just rewrite it in standard form. That would be 8x squared, highest exponent, plus the 10x, next highest, minus 3, equals 0. Now, I have a trinomial, but I now have a coefficient of 8. So I have to slide it to the back and multiply. So in my x puzzle, we have a negative 24 on top and a positive 10 on the bottom. Because I know it's negative here, it's going to be a negative and a positive. So what factors of 24 have a sum of 10? No, that didn't give me a sum of 10. 6 and 6 is 12. Huh? 6 and negative 4 give me a positive 2 if I add them together. I need it to be 10.
Oh. 6 is negative.
I know, 6 plus a negative 4 equals 2.
Oh, wait, 10.
Mm-hmm.
12 and 2 of me.
Okay. So positive 12, right? Negative 2. That makes sense? Because 2 times 12 gives you 24. Yeah, but we need it to be, okay. All right, so we're going to write x minus 2 and x plus 12 in parentheses. Oops, sorry, that's 12 equals 0. But because we had a coefficient of this right here, this 8, you got to divide it by 8. And now this can be reduced. I can reduce right here. What is a negative 2 over 8 reduced to? Yeah, 1/4. All right. What is 12 over 8 reduced to? 3 over 2. Yeah, there we go. So x minus 1/4 and x plus 3 over 2, that's equal to 0, which means my x values would be what? Positive 1/4 and negative 3 over 2. Yes, make sure you do the opposite of the sign. All right, so on number 3, is it in standard form? Is it equal to 0? Yep, okay, so what I need to do now is hopefully you see you got a GCF. What's the GCF? All right, so we divide everything by 2 first. 2 is going to now give me x squared minus 4 equals to 0. Hopefully y'all see that this is a difference of squares. We got a minus sign, an exponent, and of 2 and a perfect square. So you could take the square root of each one. The square root of x squared is just x minus the square root of 4 is 2. So we're going to have x minus 2 and x plus 2 equals 0, which means my solution is x equals 2 comma negative 2. All right. On 4. Is it in standard form? No. Is it equal to 0? No. So let's put it equal to 0 so I can get it to standard form. Well, what I need to do right here to make this equal to 0? Yeah, plus x squared. So this cancels, making that 0. Now I can put it in standard form. Highest exponent, which would be x squared, then plus 5x, then plus 6 equals 0. And now there's no coefficient, so now I can go straight to my x puzzle and factor it. What number goes on top? 6. What goes on bottom? All right, factors of 6 with the sum of 5. 2 and 3. Yep. All right, so we have x plus 2, x plus 3 equals 0, meaning x is going to equal what? Negative 2, comma, negative 3. Yep. Okay. All right, so yeah. What I want you to do before you leave today, because I'll give this back to you, I just want to check your understanding, is you need to show doing one more problem on your own. If you can do more than one, great. But I need your exit ticket for today is to do one by yourself. You pick and choose which one you want to do. You can pick the same one as your group member if you want to check and see if you are going through it correctly. All right.